The laundry basket sat on our bed like evidence waiting for trial. Jennifer's blouses hung limp in my hands, each one carrying a scent that wasn't her usual perfume. Something expensive. Something new. Something that made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't quite name yet. "My boss is tough," she'd said last night, walking through the door at 11:30 with her hair slightly mussed and her lipstick gone. "He demands excellence." I folded another blouse, this one silk and wrinkled in all the wrong places. Michael Ashford, 34 years old, former Army communications specialist turned IT engineer, reduced to playing house detective with his wife's wardrobe. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 6 years in the military learning to spot patterns, analyze data, and detect threats. Now I was using those skills on my own marriage. "I can't say no to overtime," Jennifer had continued, kicking off heels that cost more than my monthly gym membership. "Richard expects his project managers to be available when he needs us." Richard Thornton, her boss for the past 8 months. The man who'd transformed my punctual wife into someone who treated our dinner table like a suggestion and our bedroom like a hotel room she occasionally visited. The front door slammed downstairs, followed by the familiar click of her heels on hardwood. 7:15 in the morning. She left at 6, claiming an early meeting with the development team. 45 minutes seemed awfully short for a meeting that required leaving before sunrise. "Mike?" Her voice carried up the stairs with that artificially bright tone she'd perfected lately. "I'm grabbing coffee and heading back to the office. Richard scheduled another emergency session." Another emergency. In the 8 months since her promotion, Richard Thornton had manufactured more emergencies than a small-town fire department. I walked to our bedroom window and watched her BMW back out of the driveway, noting how she checked her reflection in the rearview mirror twice before pulling away. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "You deserve to know. Check the parking lot behind Meridian Tech tonight, 9:45 p.m. Come alone." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Someone else had noticed the patterns. Someone else was connecting dots I'd been afraid to draw lines between. The day crawled by in a haze of network diagnostics and server maintenance. My cubicle at Dataflow Solutions felt smaller than usual, the fluorescent lights humming with the same frequency as the questions buzzing in my head. Every time my phone remained silent, I wondered where Jennifer was and who she was with. At lunch, I drove past Meridian Tech's gleaming glass building. Jennifer's BMW sat in its usual spot, 3rd row from the building. Nothing unusual there. But parked 2 spaces away was a black Mercedes SUV with personalized plates reading EXCEL1. Richard Thornton's car. The man who demanded excellence had a license plate to prove it. Brian called around 3. My best friend since high school, now owner of Iron Will Fitness, where I'd been working out for the past 5 years. "You sound like garbage, Mike. Everything okay?" "Just tired. Jennifer's been pulling long hours." "Still, man, that company's working her like a rented mule. When's the last time you two did something together?" I couldn't remember. Dinner together had become a weekly event if we were lucky. Date nights had vanished entirely. Even our conversations had shrunk to logistics about bills, schedules, and whose turn it was to pick up groceries. "She's dedicated to her career," I said, hearing how hollow the word sounded even to me. "Dedicated's one thing. This sounds like something else entirely." Brian had always been direct. Too direct, sometimes. But his instincts about people were usually spot on. He'd never liked Jennifer's transformation from the easygoing woman I'd married 3 years ago into the ambitious corporate climber she'd become. "I might swing by the gym tonight," I said. "Need to work off some stress." "Good. Bring your frustrations. We'll beat them into submission." The afternoon stretched endlessly. Every email notification made me jump, hoping for a message from Jennifer explaining where she was or when she'd be home. Instead, I got automated system updates and requests from colleagues who actually kept normal business hours. At 9:30, I sat in my Honda Civic across the street from Meridian Tech's parking lot, feeling like the worst kind of fool. The anonymous text could have been a prank, a mistake, a trap. But something deeper than curiosity had driven me here, something that felt suspiciously like certainty. The parking lot was nearly empty. Security lights cast harsh shadows between the remaining cars. Jennifer's BMW sat exactly where I'd seen it earlier. The black Mercedes was still there too, now parked directly beside her car instead of 2 spaces away. At exactly 9:45, I saw movement. 2 figures emerged from the building's side entrance, walking close together. Too close for colleagues, too comfortable for a professional relationship. Jennifer laughed at something Richard said, tilting her head back in a gesture I recognized from our early dating days. He placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward his Mercedes with the casual familiarity of repetition. They didn't get in the car immediately. Instead, they stood beside it, talking in low voices while Richard's hands moved to Jennifer's waist. She didn't pull away, didn't step back, didn't maintain the professional distance that should exist between a project manager and her supervisor. When he kissed her, she leaned into it. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I activated the camera and zoomed in. The first photo caught them mid-embrace. The second showed Jennifer's hand on his chest. The third captured them getting into his car, her laughter visible even through the windshield. The Mercedes windows fogged quickly. I sat there for 20 minutes, taking time-stamped photos and fighting the urge to march across the parking lot and pound on that fogged glass. My military training kicked in, the same analytical calm that had served me well in communications intelligence. Document everything, verify the facts, plan the response. As I prepared to leave, another camera flash lit up the parking lot from the opposite direction. Someone else was documenting this scene. Someone else was building a case. The Mercedes finally started moving at 10:30. I followed at a distance, watching as Richard drove to the Marriott downtown. They disappeared into the hotel together, Jennifer's hand in his, as they walked through the lobby like a couple on vacation. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Now you know. There's more. Are you ready to see it all?" I typed back quickly. "Who is this?" "Someone who believes you deserve better. Meet me at the last call tomorrow night, 8 p.m. corner booth." The last call was a dive bar 3 blocks from my house, the kind of place where locals nursed cheap beer and shared gossip like currency. Not somewhere I'd expect to meet a mysterious informant, but then again, nothing about this situation felt normal anymore. I drove home through empty streets, my mind racing through 3 years of marriage, 8 months of changes, and 1 night of confirmation. Jennifer's car wasn't in our driveway. Her side of the bed would be empty when I got there, just like it had been for the past 2 months. "My boss is tough," I said aloud, practicing her words in the darkness of our living room. "He demands excellence. I can't say no to overtime." She'd been right about one thing. She couldn't say no to anything he asked. But I was about to learn the art of saying yes. Yes to truth. Yes to evidence. Yes to consequences. Yes to making sure excellence got exactly what it deserved. The last call smelled like decades of spilled beer and broken promises. I arrived at 8 sharp, scanning the dimly lit interior for someone who looked like they had information to sell. The corner booth sat empty, red vinyl cracked and patched with duct tape. "Michael Ashford?" I turned to find a woman in her early 40s, professionally dressed but with tired eyes that suggested she'd seen too much workplace drama. Brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, minimal makeup, the kind of person who blended into corporate backgrounds. "Patricia Vance," she said, extending her hand. "I work with your wife. Worked anyway. I put in my 2 weeks' notice this morning." We settled into the booth while I processed this information. Patricia ordered coffee. I stuck with beer, figuring I'd need something stronger than caffeine for whatever she was about to tell me. "You sent the texts," I said. "I did, and I'm sorry it took me this long to reach out. What's been happening at Meridian Tech isn't just unprofessional, it's predatory. Patricia pulled a manila envelope from her purse, sliding it across the scarred table surface. Richard Thornton has a pattern. Jennifer isn't his first victim, and she won't be his last unless someone stops him. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were printed emails, photographs, and what looked like official company documents. The first email was from Richard to Jennifer, dated 6 months ago. Excellent work on the Morrison project. Your dedication to excellence sets you apart from other team members. I'd like to discuss your career development over dinner. Thursday, 7 p.m., Romano's. The second email was Jennifer's response. Thank you for recognizing my efforts. Dinner sounds wonderful. I'm committed to achieving excellence in everything I do. Romano's is where it started, Patricia explained. Expensive restaurant downtown. He uses the same approach every time. Praise their work, suggest career advancement, then gradually blur the lines between professional and personal. I flipped through more emails, watching the progression from business discussions to increasingly personal exchanges. Richard's messages became more demanding, Jennifer's responses more accommodating. The timeline painted a picture of systematic manipulation disguised as mentorship. She really believed he was helping her career, Patricia said quietly. Richard's good at making his targets feel special, chosen. He tells them they have potential other people can't see. Other targets? 3 in the past 2 years. Sarah from accounting, Lisa from marketing, and now Jennifer. The pattern's always the same. Late meetings, special projects, weekend emergencies. Then the relationship escalates, and the woman either quits in shame or gets transferred to a different department. I studied Patricia's face, looking for signs of deception or personal vendetta. Her expression remained steady, professional. This wasn't about revenge or jealousy. This was about justice. Why didn't anyone report him before now? Who would believe us? Richard's a vice president with 15 years at the company. He's careful about documentation, never puts anything explicitly inappropriate in writing. The women he targets are usually newer employees who don't want to risk their careers by making accusations. She pulled out another set of documents. But Jennifer made a mistake. She started using company email for personal messages, and Richard got careless because he thought she was completely under his control. The next batch of emails was more recent, from the past month. Jennifer's messages had become almost desperate in their eagerness to please. I'll stay as late as you need me to. Excellence requires sacrifice. The Morrison project can wait. Your needs come first. I've cleared my weekend. Whatever you require, I'm available. Available, I repeated, tasting the word like poison. She told me she was working weekends to meet deadlines. She was meeting his needs, not project deadlines. Richard's been using company resources to fund their relationship. Hotel rooms charged to the travel budget, expensive dinners labeled as client meetings, even gifts purchased through the office supply account. Patricia showed me credit card statements and expense reports that painted a clear picture of corporate policy violations. Richard had been financing his affair with company money, while Jennifer provided services that had nothing to do with project management. This is enough to get them both terminated, I said. It's enough to get Richard arrested for embezzlement and harassment. Jennifer might face charges too, depending on how cooperative she is with the investigation. I closed the envelope, my hands surprisingly steady. The evidence was comprehensive, damning, and beautifully documented. Patricia had built a case that would destroy both their careers and possibly land them in legal trouble. What do you want in return for this? Patricia smiled for the first time since we'd sat down. I want Richard Thornton to face consequences for his actions. I want the women he's hurt to see justice, and I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else. And Jennifer? Your wife made her choices. She knew Richard was married. She knew their relationship violated company policy. She chose to participate because she thought it would advance her career. Patricia's voice hardened slightly. She chose excellence over ethics. We spent another hour going through the evidence. Patricia had been documenting Richard's behavior for months, collecting emails, photographing expense reports, and building witness statements from other employees who'd observed the inappropriate relationship. "The parking lot photos you took last night were the final piece," she said. "Physical evidence of their relationship during company time, using company property. You saw me there? I was the other camera flash. I've been following them for weeks, documenting their meetings, but I needed someone with standing to make the complaint. A spouse has more credibility than a disgruntled coworker." Patricia had thought of everything. She'd prepared multiple copies of the evidence package, researched corporate policy violations, and even identified the appropriate recipients for the information. "HR will have to act on this," she said. "The evidence is too comprehensive to ignore. Richard's immediate supervisor, the compliance department, and the legal team will all receive copies simultaneously. No one will be able to bury this or sweep it under the rug. When do we send it? Tomorrow morning, first thing. By noon, both Richard and Jennifer will be suspended pending investigation. By the end of the week, they'll both be terminated." I walked Patricia to her car, feeling like I'd just enlisted an army general in a war I'd been fighting alone. She'd given me weapons, strategy, and most importantly, the confidence that justice was possible. "One more thing," she said before getting into her sedan. "Richard's wife, Margaret, doesn't know about the affairs. She deserves to see the evidence, too." "You have her contact information?" Patricia handed me another envelope. "Address, phone number, email, and her work schedule. She's a family law attorney, by the way. She'll know exactly what to do with this information." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. For 8 months, I'd been reacting to Jennifer's lies, adapting to her schedule, accepting her excuses. Now I had the power to act instead of react. Jennifer's car was in the driveway when I arrived, kitchen lights glowing warm and welcoming. She'd probably prepared some story about her late meeting, maybe even cooked dinner as a peace offering for her recent absences. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at our house and thinking about the woman inside who'd been living a double life. Tomorrow, her world would collapse, her career would end, her marriage would be over, her reputation would be destroyed. She'd demanded excellence from herself and received it from Richard Thornton. Now she was about to discover what excellence looked like when it was turned against her. I walked inside, smiling as I greeted my wife for what I knew would be one of the last times. "How was your day, honey?" Jennifer asked, stirring something that smelled like her grandmother's pasta sauce. "Excellent," I said. "Absolutely excellent." The email went out at 8:30 Tuesday morning, marked urgent and copied to 5 recipients. Human Resources Director Susan Walsh, Compliance Officer David Chen, Regional Vice President Thomas Anderson, Legal Counsel Maria Santos, and CEO Jonathan Pierce. Patricia had insisted on the wide distribution to prevent any single person from burying the complaint. Subject: Policy violations and misconduct. Richard Thornton and Jennifer Ashford. I kept the message brief and professional, letting the evidence speak for itself. 47 pages of documentation, including emails, expense reports, witness statements, and time-stamped photographs. Everything organized chronologically with a detailed summary of policy violations. By 9:15, my phone rang. "Mr. Ashford, this is Susan Walsh from Meridian Tech Human Resources. I've received your complaint and reviewed the supporting documentation. I need to schedule an interview with you as soon as possible. I'm available whenever you need me. Can you be here at 11? This is a serious matter that requires immediate attention." I arrived at Meridian Tech's headquarters 20 minutes early, wearing my best suit and carrying copies of everything Patricia had given me. The lobby buzzed with normal corporate activity, employees hurrying between meetings with coffee cups and tablets, unaware that two of their colleagues were about to become cautionary tales. Susan Walsh was exactly what I'd expected from a corporate HR director, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of authority that came from handling workplace crises. She led me to a conference room where David Chen and Maria Santos were already waiting. "Mr. Ashford, thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. Before we begin, I want you to know that Meridian Tech takes these allegations extremely seriously. We have a zero-tolerance policy for the behavior described in your complaint." For the next 2 hours, I walked them through the evidence. They asked detailed questions about dates, locations, and sources. Maria Santos took extensive notes while David Chen photographed each document with a high-resolution scanner. "The expense report irregularities alone constitute grounds for termination," Chen said, studying Richard's credit card statements. "Using company funds for personal entertainment is theft, regardless of any other misconduct. The email communications establish a clear pattern of harassment and abuse of power," Santos added. "Mr. Thornton used his supervisory position to coerce a subordinate into a relationship. That's textbook harassment." Susan Walsh reviewed the parking lot photographs with particular attention. These images were taken on company property during business hours, using company vehicles. This demonstrates that their relationship directly impacted the workplace environment. "What happens now?" I asked. "Both employees will be suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort them from the building and revoke their access credentials. The investigation should conclude within 72 hours, at which point we'll make final employment decisions." "How long before they're notified?" Walsh checked her watch. "Mr. Thornton and Mrs. Ashford are being called to separate meetings right now. They'll be informed of the suspension and investigation simultaneously." I left Meridian Tech feeling like I'd just watched the first domino fall in a carefully constructed chain. By the time I reached my car, Jennifer's phone was probably ringing with the news that her career was over. My own phone buzzed with a text message. "Meeting with HR now. Don't know what's happening. We'll call you later." I didn't respond. Let her figure it out on her own. The second envelope went to Margaret Thornton's law office via courier, marked personal and confidential. Patricia had included her home address as well, but I figured Richard's wife would want to receive this information in a professional setting where she could immediately consult with colleagues about her legal options. The third package went to the local newspaper's business reporter, anonymously delivered with a note suggesting they investigate corporate misconduct at one of the city's largest employers. Even if criminal charges weren't filed, public exposure would ensure that Richard's behavior became widely known in professional circles. I spent the afternoon at work trying to focus on routine network maintenance while my phone remained conspicuously silent. No calls from Jennifer, no texts explaining her situation, no desperate pleas for support or understanding. Around 4:30, Brian called. "Dude, you need to get down to the last call. There's some serious drama going down, and your wife's name is being mentioned." "What kind of drama?" "The kind that involves security guards, angry spouses, and very public meltdowns. Cheryl's been live tweeting the whole thing from the bar. You need to see this." I drove to the last call with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The parking lot was fuller than usual for a Tuesday afternoon, suggesting that word of the day's events had spread quickly through the local gossip network. Cheryl Morrison held court at the bar, her phone in one hand and a beer in the other, regaling a small crowd with secondhand details of corporate drama. "Security walked them both out at the same time," she was saying. "Separately, but everyone could see what was happening. Jennifer Ashford looked like she'd been crying for hours." "What about the boss?" someone asked. Richard Thornton tried to act all dignified, but his wife showed up right as they were putting him in the parking lot. "Margaret Thornton is a lawyer, you know. She doesn't mess around when she's angry." I ordered a beer and listened to Cheryl's account of the afternoon's events. According to her sources, which seemed to include half of Meridian Tech's administrative staff, the investigation had moved quickly once HR reviewed the evidence. "They called Richard in first," Cheryl continued. 30 minutes later, security was cleaning out his office. Then they brought in Jennifer, and she completely fell apart. Started crying, saying she'd been manipulated, claiming she was the victim. Victim? I said, unable to keep quiet. Cheryl turned to me with the predatory smile of someone who'd just found fresh gossip material. Well, well, Michael Ashford. Heard you had an interesting day. Just listening to your story, Cheryl. My story. Honey, this is your story. Everyone knows you're the one who dropped the hammer on those two. Question is, what took you so long? The bar fell silent as every patron turned to look at me. Small towns had their advantages and disadvantages. Today, the scrutiny felt like both. I found out about their relationship and reported it to the appropriate authorities, I said carefully. The rest is between lawyers and HR departments. Found out how, Cheryl pressed. Someone had to have some pretty solid evidence to get 2 people fired in one day. Before I could answer, the bar's front door opened and Margaret Thornton walked in. Richard's soon-to-be ex-wife was exactly as Patricia had described, mid-40s, professionally dressed, and radiating the kind of controlled fury that came from years of courtroom experience. She scanned the room until her eyes found me, then walked over with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been looking forward to this conversation. Michael Ashford? I'm Margaret Thornton. I believe we have something to discuss. The bar's attention shifted to this new development. Cheryl practically vibrated with excitement at the prospect of witnessing a real-time confrontation between the betrayed spouses. Can we talk privately? Margaret asked. Sure. There's a back room we can use. We settled into a quiet corner booth while the rest of the bar pretended not to strain their ears in our direction. Margaret pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it to reveal printed copies of the evidence I'd sent to her office. Thank you, she said simply. For 15 years, I've suspected Richard of having affairs, but I never had proof. You've given me everything I need to protect myself and my children in the divorce proceedings. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Don't be. I'm sorry it took this long for someone to document his behavior. How long did you know about Jennifer's involvement? I suspected something for months, but I only got confirmation 2 days ago. A co-worker helped me gather evidence. Margaret nodded approvingly. Patricia Vance. She called my office this morning to offer testimony if needed. That woman deserves a medal for her courage. What happens now? Richard will be served with divorce papers tomorrow morning. I'm filing for full custody of our children and demanding a complete financial audit of his business dealings. The evidence you provided shows a pattern of using marital assets to fund his affairs. She closed the portfolio and leaned back in her chair. What about Jennifer? Are you filing for divorce as well? Papers are already prepared. She'll be served tomorrow, same as Richard. Good. They made their choices together. They can face the consequences together. Margaret stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Richard called me this afternoon, trying to explain the situation. He claimed Jennifer seduced him, said she was the aggressor in their relationship. Apparently, taking responsibility isn't part of his skill set. What did you tell him? Margaret smiled coldly. I told him that excellence demands accountability, then I hung up on him. After she left, I rejoined the bar crowd, where Cheryl was already incorporating Margaret's visit into her expanding narrative of the day's events. The story would be all over town by morning, complete with embellishments and speculation that would follow both Richard and Jennifer for years to come. My phone finally buzzed with a text from Jennifer. We need to talk. I'm at my sister's house. Please call me. I finished my beer, left money on the bar, and walked out without responding to her message. Jennifer had spent 8 months choosing Richard over our marriage. Now she could spend whatever time she had left dealing with the consequences of that choice. Excellence achieved, indeed. Jennifer's sister lived in a subdivision 20 minutes across town, the kind of place where identical houses sat on identical lots behind identical mailboxes. I'd been there exactly twice in 3 years of marriage, both times for obligatory holiday gatherings where Linda made passive-aggressive comments about my career prospects and Jennifer nodded along like a supportive sibling. Now Jennifer's BMW sat in Linda's driveway like a refugee seeking asylum. I parked across the street and called Jennifer's number. She answered on the first ring. "Mike, thank God. Where are you?" "Looking at your car. Come outside. We're going to have this conversation once, and then we're done." "Can't you come in? Linda's making dinner and we could—" "Outside, Jennifer. Now." She appeared at the front door 2 minutes later, still wearing the professional outfit she'd put on that morning when her biggest concern was impressing Richard Thornton. Now she looked like someone who'd spent the day crying in corporate conference rooms and HR offices. "How could you do this to me?" she said before I could speak. "How could you destroy my career over a misunderstanding?" "Misunderstanding?" I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the parking lot photos. "Explain the misunderstanding here." Jennifer glanced at the image and immediately looked away. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you're having an affair with your married boss using company time and company property. What am I misunderstanding?" Richard manipulated me. He used his position to pressure me into a relationship I didn't want. I was afraid to say no because he controlled my career advancement. I'd expected this defense. Patricia had warned me that Jennifer would likely claim victimhood once the consequences became real. The problem was that her own emails contradicted every word she was saying. "You were afraid to say no," I repeated. "Is that why you wrote to him about clearing your weekends to meet his needs? Fear made you tell him that his needs came before project deadlines?" Jennifer's face went pale. "You read my emails?" "Corporate read your emails. HR read your emails. Legal read your emails. Your husband's lawyer read your emails. Richard's wife read your emails. By tomorrow, half the city will have read your emails." Those messages were taken out of context. Richard demanded that I be available for legitimate business purposes. Business purposes? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jennifer, you used company email to coordinate hotel meetings with a married man. You charged romantic dinners to your expense account. You participated in embezzling company funds to finance your affair." "I never stole anything." "You accepted gifts purchased with company money. You used company time for personal activities. You violated every ethics policy Meridian Tech has on the books." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You chose this, Jennifer. Every email, every meeting, every lie you told me. You chose Richard over our marriage because you thought it would advance your career. I made mistakes, but I can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems." "Our problems?" I interrupted. "We don't have problems. You have problems. You have unemployment, legal liability, and a divorce to deal with. I have freedom." Jennifer started crying, the kind of desperate tears that came when someone realized their manipulative tactics weren't working. "Please don't do this. I love you. Richard meant nothing to me." "Richard meant your career advancement. I meant financial security and a stable home base while you pursued other interests. The difference is, Richard's wife has better lawyers than I do." "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out the divorce papers Patricia had helped me prepare, complete with detailed financial disclosures and evidence of Jennifer's misconduct. "It means you're going to sign these tonight, or tomorrow you'll be dealing with a contested divorce while facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement." Jennifer took the papers with shaking hands, scanning the first page with growing horror. "You can't take half of everything. The house, my retirement account, my car. I'm not taking half of anything. You're giving up your claim to marital assets in exchange for my agreement not to pursue criminal charges or sue you for emotional distress. That's not fair." "Fair?" I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "Fair would have been you respecting our marriage vows. Fair would have been you being honest about your relationship with Richard. Fair would have been you choosing your husband over your boss." Linda appeared at the front door, clearly eavesdropping on our conversation. "Jennifer, you don't have to listen to this. Come inside and we'll call a lawyer." "Good idea," I said. "Call a lawyer. Call several lawyers. Ask them what happens to unfaithful spouses who commit workplace misconduct and embezzlement. Ask them how much alimony courts award to women who destroy their own marriages." Jennifer looked between me and the divorce papers, finally beginning to understand that her situation was worse than she'd realized. "Where am I supposed to live? I don't have a job anymore." "That's not my problem. You made your choices and now you get to live with them. Sign the papers, Jennifer, tonight, or tomorrow gets much worse for you." I walked back to my car, leaving her standing in Linda's driveway with the documents that would legally end our marriage. As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, still reading through the terms of her surrender. My phone rang as I reached the main road. Patricia's number. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as expected. She's claiming victimhood and manipulation, but she'll sign the papers. Linda's probably helping her look for loopholes right now." "There aren't any. I made sure of that when I helped you draft the agreement. Jennifer's best option is to sign quickly and quietly before Richard tries to throw her under the bus to save himself." "Is he likely to do that?" "He's already started. Margaret told me he's claiming Jennifer initiated their relationship and pressured him into the affair. He's going to argue that he was the victim of workplace seduction." I pulled into a gas station parking lot, needing to process this information. Can he make that argument stick? Not with the evidence we have. The emails show a clear pattern of Richard using his authority to manipulate Jennifer, but it also shows Jennifer's enthusiastic participation. They're both guilty, and they're both going to try to minimize their responsibility by blaming each other. What about the criminal charges? That depends on how much money they actually stole and whether the district attorney thinks it's worth prosecuting. The company will probably prefer to handle it internally to avoid bad publicity. Patricia was right. Meridian Tech would want to resolve this quietly, without newspaper headlines about executive misconduct and embezzlement. Richard and Jennifer would lose their jobs and their reputations, but they'd probably avoid jail time. "There's something else," Patricia said. "Richard called me this afternoon trying to get me to change my statement to HR. He offered me Jennifer's old position if I'd testify that she was the aggressor in their relationship." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that excellence requires integrity, something he wouldn't understand. Then I reported his attempt to suborn perjury to the police. I drove home through quiet suburban streets, thinking about the chain of events I'd set in motion 2 days ago. By tomorrow, both Richard and Jennifer would be unemployed, facing divorce proceedings, and dealing with potential criminal charges. Their reputations would be destroyed, their careers finished, their futures uncertain. Jennifer's car wasn't in our driveway. Good. I wasn't ready to deal with her attempts at reconciliation or manipulation. Tonight, I wanted to sit in my own house, drink my own beer, and enjoy the silence of a home that no longer echoed with lies. The landline rang at 11:30, Jennifer's number on the caller ID. "The papers are signed," she said without preamble. "Linda's going to fax them to your lawyer in the morning." "Good. I need to get some of my things from the house, personal items, clothes, family photos. I'll box everything up and leave it in the garage. You can pick it up this weekend when I'm not home. Mike, please, can't we at least try to work through this? I know I made mistakes, but people can change. Marriages can survive infidelity if both people are willing to." I hung up on her. Excellence achieved. The story broke in Thursday's business section with a headline that made me choke on my morning coffee. Meridian Tech executives terminated in ethics scandal. The reporter had done her homework, connecting Richard's expense account irregularities with Jennifer's sudden departure and painting a picture of corporate misconduct that would follow both of them for years. By noon, the story had migrated from the business pages to social media, where it took on a life of its own. Someone had leaked additional details about the parking lot encounters and hotel meetings, complete with speculation about other affairs and cover-ups within the company. Cheryl called me at work, practically vibrating with excitement. Have you seen the news? They're calling it the biggest corporate scandal in the city's history. Channel 7 wants to interview you for the evening broadcast. I'm not talking to reporters, Cheryl. Why not? You're the hero of this story, the wronged husband who brought down the corrupt executives. People love that narrative. People love drama. I just want to move on with my life. But moving on proved more complicated than I'd anticipated. My phone rang constantly, with calls from reporters, lawyers, and curious acquaintances who'd suddenly remembered we were friends. Jennifer's sister Linda left increasingly hostile voicemails accusing me of destroying her family out of spite and revenge. The most interesting call came from Margaret Thornton's attorney. Mr. Ashford, this is James Patterson from Patterson and Associates. I represent Margaret Thornton in her divorce proceedings. Mrs. Thornton would like to coordinate our legal strategies to ensure maximum accountability for both defendants. What kind of coordination? Richard is claiming that Jennifer initiated their relationship and manipulated him into the affair. We have evidence that contradicts his version of events, but we'd like to ensure our testimonies align to prevent either defendant from escaping responsibility. What do you need from me? A detailed timeline of your observations, copies of any evidence you haven't already provided, and your agreement to testify in both divorce proceedings if necessary. I spent Friday afternoon in Patterson's office, going through my documentation with the methodical precision of a military intelligence briefing. Margaret sat in on the meeting, taking notes and asking pointed questions about dates, locations, and Jennifer's behavior patterns. Richard's trying to negotiate a settlement that would give him partial custody of our children, she explained. I'm not allowing a man who commits adultery and embezzlement to have unsupervised access to my teenagers. What's his argument? He claims Jennifer seduced him during a vulnerable period in our marriage, says she took advantage of his dedication to mentoring junior employees. Margaret's laugh was bitter and sharp. Apparently, Richard was the victim of workplace harassment, not the perpetrator. Patterson pulled out a thick file of documents. We have 17 years of marriage records, financial statements, and witness testimony that establishes Richard's pattern of infidelity and financial irresponsibility. Jennifer wasn't his first affair, just his most expensive. Most expensive? Hotel rooms, restaurant bills, gifts, weekend trips. Richard spent nearly $40,000 of company money on Jennifer over 8 months. That's not counting what he spent from our joint accounts before he started embezzling. The numbers were staggering. Richard had treated Jennifer like an expensive hobby, funding their relationship with stolen money while his wife managed their household budget and raised their children. The betrayal went beyond simple adultery into systematic financial abuse. What happens to Jennifer in all this? I asked. That depends on how cooperative she is with our investigation, Patterson said. If she testifies truthfully about Richard's role in initiating and funding their relationship, we might recommend leniency in any criminal proceedings. If she supports his version of events, she becomes a co-conspirator in fraud and perjury. I left the law office with a clearer understanding of the legal battlefield Jennifer and Richard were about to enter. Their affair had created a complex web of civil and criminal liability that would take months to untangle. Both of them would emerge from the process financially devastated and professionally ruined. Saturday morning brought the weekend edition of the newspaper, which featured a follow-up story about Meridian Tech's response to the scandal. The company had hired an outside firm to conduct a comprehensive audit of executive expenses and workplace relationships. 3 other managers had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Jennifer's affair with Richard had opened a door that revealed years of corporate misconduct and abuse of power. The scandal would ultimately cost Meridian Tech millions in legal fees, settlements, and lost business. I was organizing Jennifer's belongings in the garage when Patricia called. "Have you seen Richard lately?" she asked. "No. Why?" "He's been calling former colleagues, trying to line up character witnesses for his divorce proceedings. Apparently, he's having trouble finding people willing to testify on his behalf. Can't imagine why. It gets better. Margaret's lawyer subpoenaed his personal financial records going back 5 years. They found evidence of 2 other affairs, both funded with family money. Richard's about to lose everything. What about Jennifer? She's staying with her sister, trying to find a job that doesn't require background checks or professional references. Turns out being fired for ethics violations makes you unemployable in corporate America. Patricia had been tracking both Richard and Jennifer's post-termination activities with the thoroughness of a private investigator. She'd documented Richard's failed attempts to secure new employment, Jennifer's rejections from potential employers, and both of their struggles with the social ostracism that followed public scandal. "Why are you keeping such close tabs on them?" I asked. "Because I want to make sure they face real consequences for their actions. Too many powerful men like Richard escape accountability by claiming victimhood or blaming women for their own misconduct. I'm not letting that happen this time." Sunday evening brought an unexpected visitor. I was watching television when the doorbell rang, revealing Jennifer standing on my front porch with a suitcase and red-rimmed eyes. "Linda kicked me out," she said without preamble. "She says I'm bringing too much drama into her life. I have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem anymore. Please, Mike, just for a few days, until I can find an apartment. I'll sleep in the guest room. You won't even know I'm here. The divorce papers are signed, Jennifer. You don't live here anymore. I know I made mistakes, but I'm trying to rebuild my life. Can't you show a little compassion for someone who's lost everything?" I looked at my ex-wife, standing on the porch of the house she'd shared with me while conducting an affair with her boss. She'd lost her job, her marriage, her reputation, and her family's support. But she hadn't lost everything through bad luck or circumstances beyond her control. "You didn't lose everything, Jennifer. You traded everything. You traded our marriage for career advancement. You traded your integrity for expensive dinners and hotel rooms. You traded your reputation for 8 months of feeling special and chosen. I was manipulated. You were flattered. There's a difference. Richard told you that you were excellent, that you deserved more than other people could offer, that you were worth breaking rules for. And you believed him because it felt good to be the exception." Jennifer started crying again, but this time the tears felt calculated, designed to evoke sympathy rather than express genuine remorse. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's a question you should have asked before you started your affair. Excellence demands planning, right? You planned 8 months of deception. Now you get to plan your recovery." I closed the door and watched through the window as Jennifer loaded her suitcase back into her car. She sat in the driveway for several minutes, probably hoping I'd change my mind and invite her inside. When I didn't appear, she finally drove away. My phone buzzed with a text message an hour later. "I'll always love you, Mike. I hope someday you can forgive me." I deleted the message without responding. Excellence achieved, finally and completely.